Homelander isn't scary because he can kill you. He's scary because he can smile while doing it. That's the difference. Most villains want power. Homelander already has it. Most villains want money. Homelander doesn't need it. Most villains fear consequences. Homelander barely has any, so here's the real question. How do you stop a man when nobody can stop him? And the answer is far more disturbing than you think. At first glance, Homelander looks like a superhero. He wears the cape. He saves people, crowds cheer for him, children look up to him. And cameras follow him everywhere. He's everything a hero should be, at least on the surface. But that's exactly what makes him terrifying, because Homelander isn't pretending to be a villain. He's pretending to be a hero, and those are two very different things. Most villains hide from society. Homelander wants society to love him. He wants applause, he wants attention, he wants approval. And when he gets it, everything looks normal. But when he doesn't, that's when the mask starts slipping. Think about it. Every time Homelander enters a scene, something feels wrong. You don't know what, you don't know when, but you know it. Your brain immediately starts asking questions. Is he angry? Is he about to snap? Is someone about to die? That's the genius of the character. The audience never feels safe around him. Not even when he's smiling, especially when he's smiling, because normal people smile when they're happy. Homelander smiles when he's hiding something, and that's a terrifying difference. Most fictional villains have limits. Homelander doesn't seem to have any. Batman can be arrested. Joker can be stopped. Even Thanos could be defeated. But Homelander feels different, because inside his world almost nobody can challenge him. He's stronger than everyone, faster than everyone, and more dangerous than everyone. That's not power, that's isolation. And isolation changes people. Imagine being the strongest person on Earth. Imagine knowing nobody can force you to do anything. Nobody can punish you. Nobody can fight you. Nobody can even make you listen. At first, that sounds amazing. Then it becomes terrifying because power without limits slowly removes accountability. And accountability is what keeps people grounded. Homelander doesn't have that. That's why every conversation feels dangerous. Every interview feels dangerous. Every public appearance feels dangerous. Because one bad moment could change everything, and nobody knows when that moment will come. The scariest thing about Homelander isn't his strength, it's his unpredictability. A villain with a plan can be stopped. A villain with rules can be understood. But Homelander doesn't always follow rules. He follows emotions, and emotions change quickly. One moment he wants praise. The next moment he wants revenge. One moment he wants love. The next moment he wants fear, and that's what keeps viewers uncomfortable, because they aren't watching a superhero. They're watching a ticking bomb that can fly. But here's where things become even darker. Homelander isn't terrifying because he's evil. He's terrifying because he thinks he's right. The most dangerous people rarely see themselves as monsters. They see themselves as victims. They see themselves as heroes. They see themselves as misunderstood. And Homelander does exactly that. In his mind, the world keeps disappointing him. People keep betraying him. People keep lying to him. People keep failing him. So every terrible thing he does starts feeling justified. And once someone reaches that point, they become far more dangerous. Because guilt stops working. Shame stops working. Fear stops working. The only thing left is desire. And Homelander has plenty of that. He wants control. He wants love. He wants loyalty. He wants everyone to look at him the way children look at superheroes. But here's the cruel truth. The harder he chases love, the further away it gets. And that's where his real horror begins. Because underneath the cape, underneath the smile, underneath all that power, there's a man who desperately wants something he can never force people to give him. Love. And that's where the story becomes truly fascinating. Because the thing that makes Homelander terrifying is the exact same thing that makes him tragic. And once you understand that, his behavior starts making a lot more sense. But to understand that, we need to look at the psychology behind Homelander. Section 2. The psychology behind his behavior. Homelander wasn't born evil. That's what makes his story so disturbing, because monsters are easier to understand. If someone is born bad, the answer is simple. But Homelander's story isn't simple. It's complicated. And it starts with one thing: he never had a childhood. Most people learn empathy from parents. Most people learn trust from family. Most people learn right and wrong from the people around them. Homelander had none of that. He didn't grow up in a home, he grew up in a laboratory. Scientists observed him, researchers tested him, corporations studied him, but nobody truly loved him, and that changes a person, especially a child. Imagine being one of the most powerful beings on Earth. Now imagine spending your entire childhood completely alone. No mother, no father, no normal friendships, no real affection, just experiments. Just observation, just isolation. That's not a childhood, that's a cage, a very expensive cage, and the scars from that cage never disappeared. They simply grew bigger. As Homelander became older, his need for love became stronger. But there was a problem. He didn't understand what real love looked like, because nobody had ever shown him. He understood attention. He understood praise, he understood admiration. But love, that's different. Love isn't control, love isn't fear, love isn't obedience, and Homelander constantly confuses those things. That's why he becomes obsessed with approval. Every crowd matters, every compliment matters, every headline matters, every public reaction matters. Because deep down he's still chasing something he never received as a child. Validation. The world sees a god. Homelander sees a lonely child, and that's where his psychology becomes fascinating. Because almost everything he does can be traced back to insecurity, not confidence. Insecurity, think about it. Truly confident people don't need constant praise. Truly confident people don't panic when someone criticizes them. Truly confident people don't need millions of strangers to love them. Homelander does. Because underneath all the power, he's terrified. Terrified that people might stop loving him. Terrified that people might reject him. Terrified that people might see who he really is. And fear changes behavior. Sometimes it creates anxiety. Sometimes it creates anger. Sometimes it creates cruelty. Homelander experiences all three. That's why his emotions feel so unstable. One moment he's smiling, the next moment he's furious. One moment he's calm, the next moment he's threatening someone. One moment he wants affection, the next moment he wants dominance. Because he's constantly fighting a war inside his own head, a war between who he wants to be and who he actually is. That internal conflict explains something important. Homelander doesn't just want power. He wants emotional control. He wants people to need him. He wants people to admire him. He wants people to choose him. And whenever that doesn't happen, he feels threatened. Not physically, emotionally. That's why rejection affects him so much. For most people, rejection hurts. For Homelander, rejection feels unbearable, because it reminds him of the loneliness he spent his entire life trying to escape. And that's where things become dangerous. Because a normal person can process rejection. A normal person can move on. Homelander has the power to force people to stay. He has the power to silence criticism. He has the power to make fear look like loyalty. And once someone combines emotional insecurity with unlimited power, the results become terrifying. That's why Homelander isn't just a villain. He's a psychological tragedy, a child who never learned love, a man who mistakes attention for affection, a god who desperately wants acceptance. And a person whose greatest weakness has nothing to do with strength. It's loneliness, because despite everything he has, the fame, the power, the influence, the admiration, he's still searching for the one thing he never received, real human connection. And that's exactly why viewers can't stop watching him, because the more you understand Homelander, the more complicated he becomes. He's not just frightening, he's fascinating. And that's where the story gets even more interesting, because understanding Homelander is one thing. Explaining why millions of viewers are obsessed with him is another. And the answer might surprise you. If everyone hates Homelander, why can't people stop watching him? That's the strange part. Viewers know he's dangerous. They know he's unstable. They know he's a terrible person. Yet the moment he appears on screen, everyone's attention shifts toward him. And that's not an accident. It's because Homelander creates something most characters can't: uncertainty. Every scene becomes unpredictable. Most characters follow patterns. Heroes save people. Villains cause problems. Audiences quickly learn what to expect. Homelander breaks that rule. You never know what version of him you're about to get. Will he smile? Will he get angry? Will he stay calm? Will he completely lose control? Nobody knows, and that's exactly why people keep watching. Human beings are naturally attracted to uncertainty. It's the same reason people slow down near accidents. It's the same reason suspense movies work. Your brain wants answers. And Homelander constantly creates questions. Every scene feels like a test. Every conversation feels dangerous. Every interaction feels like it could explode, because sometimes it does. And that's where the obsession begins. But unpredictability isn't the only reason. Homelander also steals every scene he's in. Think about some of your favorite shows. Most characters share attention. Most characters take turns being important. Homelander doesn't. The moment he enters a room, he becomes the room. Your eyes follow him automatically. Your attention locks onto him automatically. Even when he's standing still. Even when he's saying nothing. That's rare, very rare. Many villains are memorable. Very few villains become impossible to ignore. Homelander does. Because his presence changes the atmosphere, the tension rises instantly. The stakes rise instantly, and viewers can feel it even before anything happens. But there's another reason people stay interested. A much deeper reason. Homelander feels real, not because of his powers, because of his emotions. Most people have never flown. Most people have never shot lasers from their eyes. Most people have never been worshipped by millions. But people understand insecurity. People understand loneliness. People understand wanting approval. And Homelander constantly reveals those emotions. That's why audiences become conflicted. They hate what he does, but they understand what he feels. And those are two very different things. A boring villain is easy to hate. A complex villain creates debate. Some viewers see a monster, some viewers see a victim, some viewers see both. And when audiences disagree, conversations never stop. That's exactly what happened with Homelander. People argue about him constantly. Was he created by his environment? Was he always destined to become dangerous? Could anyone have saved him? Could anyone have changed him? Those questions keep the character alive long after episodes end. Because viewers aren't just watching Homelander, they're trying to understand him. And understanding him isn't easy. The more you learn about him, the more complicated he becomes. One moment you fear him, the next moment you feel sorry for him, then he does something terrible. Then he reminds you of his childhood, then he becomes sympathetic again. Then he becomes horrifying again. That emotional roller coaster keeps viewers engaged. Because your feelings never settle, and that's a powerful storytelling tool. But there's one final reason audiences can't stop watching Homelander. He represents a fantasy, not a good fantasy. A dangerous one, the fantasy of unlimited power, no rules, no consequences. No authority above you. Homelander lives in that reality, and viewers get to see what happens when someone actually has it. The answer isn't freedom. The answer is corruption. The answer is loneliness. The answer is fear. And watching that transformation is fascinating, because deep down everyone wonders the same thing. What would happen if a person could do absolutely anything? Homelander gives us an answer, and it's not a comforting one. That's why people hate him. That's why people fear him. And that's why people can't stop watching him, because Homelander isn't just a character. He's a question. A question about power, a question about control, a question about human nature. And the closer viewers get to the answer, the more obsessed they become. But after everything we've discussed, one mystery still remains. What is the truth about Homelander? Is he a monster? A victim, or something far more complicated? That's where the story reaches its most important answer. Section 4, the truth about Homelander. After everything we've discussed, one question still remains. What is Homelander really? Is he a monster, a victim, a psychopath, a tragic character? The answer is uncomfortable, because Homelander is all of those things at the same time, and that's exactly why people struggle to define him. Most villains fit inside a box. Homelander doesn't. He's too complicated for that. When people look at Homelander, they usually focus on the worst things he's done. And that's understandable. He's responsible for terrible decisions. He's hurt innocent people. He's abused his power. He's terrified everyone around him. Those things are real, and they matter. But if that's all you see, you miss the bigger picture. Because Homelander wasn't created overnight. He was built, slowly, piece by piece, year after year. The corporation wanted a perfect superhero. The media wanted a perfect symbol. The public wanted a perfect hero. And Homelander spent his entire life pretending to be all three. The problem? Nobody ever asked what Homelander wanted. Nobody asked what years of isolation would do to a person. Nobody asked what happens when a child grows up without love. Nobody asked what happens when someone gets unlimited power before learning emotional control. And eventually, those questions answered themselves, in the worst possible way. That's the truth most people miss. Homelander isn't terrifying because he was born different. He's terrifying because every system around him failed to guide him, failed to challenge him, failed to teach him, failed to stop him. And when nobody stops dangerous behavior grows. That's exactly what happened. But here's where things get even darker. Homelander knows something is wrong with him. Not all the time, but enough to matter. You can see it in certain moments. The silence, the hesitation, the loneliness. The brief moments where he looks completely lost. For a few seconds, the superhero disappears, and all that's left is a broken person. A broken person who doesn't know how to fix himself. That's tragic, but tragedy doesn't erase responsibility. And that's the part many viewers argue about. Some people focus on his childhood, others focus on his actions. Some see the victim. Others see the monster. The truth sits somewhere in the middle. His past explains him, it doesn't excuse him, and that's an important difference. Because understanding why someone became dangerous isn't the same thing as forgiving them. Homelander deserves understanding, but understanding isn't the same as approval. That's what makes the character work. If he were completely evil, he'd be boring. If he were completely innocent, he'd be boring. Instead, he exists in that uncomfortable space between both extremes. And real life often works the same way. The most dangerous people rarely think they're villains. They think they're justified. They think they're right. They think the world pushed them into becoming what they became. Homelander believes that too. That's why he remains fascinating, not because viewers support him. Because viewers recognize parts of him. Not the violence, not the cruelty, the loneliness, the insecurity, the desire for acceptance, the fear of rejection. Those emotions are human. And that's what makes the character feel real. Underneath all the powers, underneath all the fame, underneath all the fear, Homelander is still chasing the same thing he wanted as a child. Someone to genuinely love him, not because they're afraid, not because they're forced, not because they worship him, because they actually care. And that's the one thing he can never force people to give him. That's the irony of Homelander. He can take almost anything, but he can't take love. He can demand loyalty. But he can't create connection. He can make people obey him, but he can't make people care about him, and deep down he knows it. That's why the strongest man in the world often feels powerless. Because the thing he wants most cannot be conquered. It must be earned. And Homelander never learned how to earn it. So what's the truth about Homelander? The truth is that he's not just a villain. He's a warning about what happens when power grows faster than character. A warning about what happens when loneliness turns into obsession. A warning about what happens when the need for love becomes the need for control. That's why people hate him. That's why people fear him. And strangely enough, that's also why people can't stop watching him. Because Homelander isn't just telling a story about superheroes. He's telling a story about human nature, just with laser eyes and a cape. And once you realize that, you stop seeing Homelander as just another villain. You start seeing him as something much more dangerous, someone who could have been different, but never got the chance. Section 5, the final verdict. So after everything we've discussed, why does everyone hate Homelander? The answer seems obvious. He's selfish, he's manipulative, he's dangerous. He's responsible for some of the worst moments in The Boys. Those reasons are real, but they're not the whole story, because millions of fictional characters have done terrible things. Yet very few create the same reaction as Homelander. Very few make audiences this uncomfortable. Very few stay in people's minds this long, and that's because Homelander isn't just a villain. He's a contradiction, the world's greatest hero and its biggest threat, the strongest man alive and one of the most emotionally fragile, the person everyone fears. And the person who fears rejection the most. That's what makes him unforgettable. The truth is that viewers don't hate Homelander because he's powerful. They hate him because they understand him just enough. Not enough to support him, not enough to defend him, but enough to recognize the emotions underneath. The loneliness, the insecurity. The need for approval, the desperate search for validation. Those feelings are human, his actions aren't. And that combination creates something rare, A character audiences can never fully accept, but can never fully ignore. That's why Homelander works. Not because he's evil, because he's believable. Take away the laser eyes, take away the super strength, take away the cape. And what do you have? A deeply insecure person trying to fill an emotional hole that never closes. The powers make him dangerous, but the psychology makes him memorable. And that's the difference. Many villains scare people, very few fascinate people. Homelander does both. He represents something uncomfortable. The idea that power doesn't solve personal problems, it amplifies them. If a kind person gains power, kindness grows. If an insecure person gains power, insecurity grows. Homelander proves that. Every season shows the same pattern. More power, more fear, more loneliness. More instability, not less. And that's why his story feels tragic, because despite everything he's achieved, he's still chasing the same thing, the thing he wanted as a child, acceptance. The thing he wanted as a teenager, love. The thing he wants as an adult, connection. And despite having almost unlimited power, he never truly gets any of them. That's the real punishment. Not prison, not defeat, not physical pain. Loneliness. Because at the end of the day, Homelander can force obedience, but he can't force genuine love. He can force silence, but he can't force trust. He can force fear, but he can't force respect. And deep down, he knows it. That's why every victory feels empty. That's why every triumph feels temporary. That's why he keeps demanding more. Because no amount of power can replace what he never had. And maybe that's the most terrifying thing about Homelander. Not that he's different from everyone else. That in some ways he isn't. His emotions are human. His desires are human. His fears are human. The difference is that most people don't have the power to act on every dark impulse. Homelander does. And that's what turns a damaged person into a nightmare. So why does everyone hate Homelander? Because he's dangerous. Why can't people stop watching him? Because he's fascinating. And why will he probably remain one of television's most memorable villains? Because every time you think you've figured him out, he reveals another layer, another insecurity, another fear, another contradiction. And that's what great characters do. They stay with you long after the episode ends, long after the credits roll, long after the story is over. Homelander isn't the hero of The Boys. He's not even the heart of The Boys. But he is the question at the center of it. What happens when unlimited power meets unlimited insecurity? The answer is Homelander, and that's exactly why nobody can look away. If you enjoy character breakdowns like this, subscribe for more stories about the characters people love, hate, and never forget. And if you thought Homelander was complicated, wait until you see the character we're putting on trial next.